it's funny, if you look at kids now making movies, as I did with Super 8 Film, they've got cameras and access to cameras that are often film resolution, professional film resolution, editing equipment that is on par in many ways with what is used professionally, visual effects, color correction software that allows for much of, what is being done professionally. So everything's accelerated, and resources have sort of become democratized to a point where everyone has access, more or less, to the tools to make movies. So when people say to me, well, what advice do you give? What do you think I should do if I want to make movies? And the amazing answer that was certainly not available to me when I was a kid is make your movie. You can actually make your movie. You can find a friend who's got a Canon 5D Mark II. You look around, you can find people to use as actors, and you just can make your film, and people are doing that, and that's the most amazing thing.
What makes a good story is a good yarn. Frequently you can get mired and get stuck in your own sludge with getting too intellectual. I think if you can tell the story, what this film is about, in more or less 30 seconds or a minute, less than a minute, then you've probably got something, because everything else after that is enlargement. This film is about boom. And it can be just a straight action adventure, but it's always better if it's character driven. So I'm nearly always looking for very strong characters.
Film schools, it's a little bit deceptive to believe you go through film school for 3 or 4 years and then you're a filmmaker. Problematic in all this is when you see young people finishing film school and they've got their diploma, and then what? There's a hostile world out there. I run my own film school as some sort of a counterpoint against what's out there, and it's a real guerrilla style sort of wild thing going on, more about a way of life than any technical things. Technical things I do not really teach, with 2 exceptions: lockpicking and forging documents. Because in a way you have to, sometimes you have to develop a certain amount of criminal energy to do what you do.
Don't wait. The door does not open from the outside. You have to get out there. And as I say, today there are so many ways in which we can tell our stories, and there are so many platforms that we can use to tell them, that you need to find like-minded people and get going. Make your short film. If you only have an iPhone to do it on, do it. Find a festival that will screen your film. Use it as a calling card. Use, the various social media platforms as a calling card, and continually hone your skills in terms of learning how to tell stories and building on how you tell stories. The more films you make, the more experienced you'll be, and the more finessed you will become.
I mean, every act is different. Like, I always used to think that directing was like horse whispering or something, and that you go up to the actor and you go like, "Mummy's gone, you want to cry." You know what I mean? Like this, and then this amazing performance happens. And it's not that at all. 90% of the work is in the casting. Like, if you get the right people, your job's nearly done, and you can let them do their thing. And it's trying not to puppeteer someone, and it's like, and say, stand here, look that way, say it like this. Like, that's like a real no-no, I think, for a lot of actors. The scene is the gap in the canyon, and what you've got to do is build a ramp for them. So you've got to talk about what just happened, what just happened to their character, what their little backstory is, what they're trying to achieve in this scene, but not tell them specifically what to do and how to do it. Like, let them figure that out. When you picture a scene, you're pulling from something subconscious, and it's usually like other films or other experiences, and if all you're ever doing is getting that, then the film's only as good as what's in your head. And to make a better film, it feels like you want it to sort of merge and get fused with things that are outside of your head, like let chaos come in a little bit. And I like a bit of chaos. I think it just keeps everything feel more real. Like it's just not the drag and drop obvious version of a scene.
When you're starting out particularly, you have to play to your strengths. You have to do something that really excites you, and whatever's different about that. And in the case of following, the non-linear structure was a somewhat unusual choice. But it's those things that are the strength of the project. It's the things that you can bring to what you're doing or bring to the filmmaking craft that maybe not everybody else is doing, maybe not everybody else can do or has thought to do. That's what's going to distinguish the thing. So it might seem in some ways more difficult or seem like something that would make the project more difficult to sell when it's finished, you know, what have you. But for me, I think the answer was definitely to try to play to my strengths and the things that I personally was passionate about.
I think the advice I'd give to directors starting out today is find brilliant stories to tell, because they're so compelling. And if you've got a fabulous story to tell, you'll know how to tell it. That sounds a slightly odd thing to say, but what the story is can give you the clues in how to tell that story, whether it be a 10-minute short film or an episode of something or even a long series. And often young people starting out are making short films, and unlike when I started, there was no means to tell a short film other than having a film crew with like 10 people in it. And now you can make it on your iPhone and you can edit it. And I think that is absolutely tremendous. I love my children making films on their iPad or on their iPhone, and then being able to edit them and practicing those skills in your own home. Would be inconceivable when I was young. So I think that's a huge leap forward, that people can make films. Just, I would say, if you want to be a director, get out and make films.
I think the biggest challenge is simply is sticking with it. You know, for so many years, if you're an independent filmmaker, you're barely paying rent. Before your work gets recognized, you're the only one who's going to believe in your work. You know, the challenge was really just getting through the years, learning how to still stay in the industry, keep up on current technology, by taking editing jobs, by shooting corporate videos, by doing whatever I can do to keep fresh. And then you're suddenly in a place where, you know, the struggles of those earlier films that may not have gotten attention suddenly are getting attention because your current one is. So it works out in the end, but it is a long road. It's a long road, and it's just about sticking with it.
I would say that in my approach, the thing that is most important to me is that I love larger than life kind of spectacle moments, but that what's important to me is that the characters are at the center, that emotionally you know where you are, and you're tracking characters that are taking you through those spectacular moments. And that to me is the most important thing, that balance of the intimacy with the spectacle and the sort of hyper-reality.
I don't know how to learn to be resistant against pressure. You probably learn it much more out in the real world. Sometimes I keep telling young people, if you have something important, really important, to do in your life, or in this year, or in this phase of your life, try to do it on foot, because that's where the world really, really responds and reveals itself.
In order to be very spontaneous on set, you need to, for me, I need to be very prepared. And specifically with a movie of that scale, everything will be designed, everything will be created. So the crew doesn't go mad. You need to really be precise. So you need to storyboard everything. I deeply love storyboarding. Why? Because it allows me, in a very quiet environment with good coffee and no pressure at all, to dream about the movie alone, you know, to make the movie I want, the ideal movie, without bad weather, without producer on my back, without actors that don't want to say their lines. I can do the movie I want once on paper. And I deeply love that process. I'm alone with a storyboard artist and I draw every frame and I dream about it. I deeply love that moment. In my first movies, I thought that the storyboards were castrative and that they were like something that will be in your way as your film. But it's total opposite. I deeply love them now. And it doesn't mean that I will shoot the storyboards on set. Sometimes Roger Deakins and we just throw them and say, okay, let's do something different because on the day there's a better idea on set. But most of the time, it's a very powerful tool also to communicate for the crew. So yes, I storyboard everything. When you storyboard also, it's a way to transform the movie into images. And I always, it's a way to rewrite the screenplay in the way I want it. So it's a very, very important moment in the film process. I'm very old-fashioned. I don't like to work with several cameras. I work with one single camera. I like to commit to one point of view, and I don't like to make any compromise. When you work with several cameras in the obligation to make compromise with lenses and with lighting, and that I can't. So I like to commit to one thing and to just embrace that and fully commit. And so I will say that technically, no matter the scale of the movie, I work with one camera.
Don't give up, even in your darkest hours, of which there will be many. I think people often come up to me and say, oh, it must be fun being a filmmaker when they find I'm a filmmaker. I go, fun? Yes, from time to time. You know, fun is the bonus. If you have a great time while you're shooting or working on a film, great. But that's not what you're doing it for. You're doing it because you're searching for something. And that's not always fun. Sometimes it's very painful.
I think one of the best pieces of advice was from my dad, who, when I was thinking about going to film school, said it's more important that you go off and learn what to make movies about than how to make movies. And so I ended up going to, leaving my home state and going to a different college, and it really did inform my storytelling, my awareness of different sort of social circles and things I never would have experienced had I stayed in Los Angeles. And then other advice that I've sort of gotten along the way, the thing that I think it's not as much advice that I was given per se, but what I kind of learned early on is that that your voice is as important as anyone else's. Now, you may not always be right, and you shouldn't be cocky about it, but that there's a kind of I felt like I needed to learn that the ideas that I had were as good as anyone else's ideas. Certainly not better, and I love the collaboration, so it wasn't like I felt like it was a battle, but it's one of those things I think that it's good to be reminded, or if you don't know it at all, be told that thing that you feel, if you really feel it, other people do too, and that's something that is to be mined and to be celebrated.
I would say, as you're learning your craft of making films, you also have to learn the business side of filmmaking and how to sell your film and how to get it financed, number one, and how to to sell your film after it's completed. That's something that I think you should tackle early on. Trust me, you'll need it. You'll need that business sense. I actually wish that I had a double major, one in one in film and one in business, or at least took business classes. I think that's a major thing. And then also, I would say just watch all films. You don't just have to watch the Criterion edition. Those are, you learn just as much, if not more, from watching bad films.
Get yourself a script and hang on to it. It's that idea, that screenplay, that concept, whatever that's going to be, that's so important. And you have to stick to your guns. You have to find something that you can do that maybe other people couldn't do. And even if that seems different or doesn't fit into people's expectations, that's what's going to distinguish it if you can do it successfully. So I think it's really about sticking to your guns and, you know, doing something you passionately believe in rather than trying to appeal to some desire that you imagine other people have for what they want to see in a film. I think you have to be true to your own passion and your own sense of what excites you as a storyteller.
The first requirement of anybody to do this job is inordinate stamina. If you ain't got stamina, don't do it. You got to drive the bus. You have to lead the way. That's the term direction. That's what it's about. If you're nervous and ninny, don't do it. If you can't thrive on stress, don't do it. Okay? Because you got to embrace stress. Stress for me is being inactive. I get very stressed if I'm not working. If I'm working and it's coming every direction, I'm completely relaxed. I think also authority is terribly important. So even if you're pretending that you know what you're doing at the beginning, try to pretend properly.